52 Network Marketing Tips is brought to you by Leaders Club. Get your own custom 90-day success plan, including one-on-one support from a personal success advisor, exclusively at leadersclub.com.
We talked in tip 27 about the fact that most marketers need to work on their follow-through before they work on follow-up. That doesn't diminish the need for effective follow-up. And when it comes to network marketing, we find very few marketers have a coordinated follow-up plan for both short-term and long-term objectives. The few that do often don't understand the principles behind what makes an effective follow-up campaign. So they're left guessing or using what someone else wrote more or less on blind faith. The result is that marketers often shut doors or they blow up bridges with a haphazard approach rather than nurturing a prospect to a decision or keeping them warm for future re-engagement. If you want to create more effective follow-up campaigns, if you want to get more mileage from the time and money you spend on leads, advertising, or even social networking, you absolutely must understand the 3 principles that make follow-up effective. And not just know about them or understand them in passing, but in such a way that you can use them in your actual marketing. The first principle to understand for effective follow-up is the familiarity principle. With the rise of the internet have come 2 interesting side effects. The first is that we have access to just about any information we want instantly. Marketers call this the 0 moment of truth. We can visit websites, read reviews, and pretty much decide on what companies to do business with or even what products or services to buy before we ever see them. The second side effect is that we can not only gather information, we can give information more or less anonymously. What's hard today is knowing who's a real person and which opinions are genuine and which ones are not, which is where the familiarity principle comes into play. We're creatures that seek the familiar. And as such, we tend to do business with people and companies that we remember, companies that we're already familiar with. The familiarity principle is so strong an instinct that it can often override the memory of specific events. Research actually shows that over time, more people will remember a specific name or a brand than will remember specific events, unless they are particularly unusual. This is why we become loyal to certain brands and even why we vote for certain political candidates. It's one reason we want to have a long-term follow-up plan. You want to become that familiar name to your prospect, not just another anonymous offer in the crowd. The second principle you need to understand is the recency principle. People tend to make decisions using the most recent data. This means when we make a decision on something, we give more weight to the newer information than the stuff that came before. This doesn't mean we don't need to worry about building a positive reputation, but that we need to have timely follow-up, which actually leads us to the third principle, which is something called the rule of last impressions. It states that while first impressions count, prospects tend to remember their last impression of you more. And in marketing, every point of contact can be a last impression. Just as your prospect will make decisions based on their most recent information, your most recent contact will have a greater influence on their impression of you than the ones that came before. This is an important principle to remember because it's always a lot easier to make a bad impression than to make a good one. Making a good impression requires a special focus. It requires special effort. Making a bad impression doesn't require any thought or effort at all. If any of your follow-up or marketing in general is rude, is hyped, is high pressure, or in any way perceived as negative by your prospect, that's what they're going to remember. This is why it's important to keep your follow-up in context, both with regard to context and frequency. I can't count how many marketers I've worked with that have blown it with their entire list of contacts by making high-pressure, hyped-up pitches for various affiliate programs that the prospect didn't actually express an interest in or request information for. The end result is that prospects unsubscribe, mark it as spam, or relegate your messages into that "I'm not going to read this" category. These principles, the familiarity principle, the recency principle, the rule of last impressions, can help you avoid a lot of very common mistakes in follow-up. If you want to learn more about how to effectively follow up in your network marketing business, Leaders Club has a lot of training resources that can transform you into an expert.